And the floor fell out of the labor market. How free job seeker time broke market discipline and the identity market that rose in its place. Hi, my name is Sarah Trumbull. I am the founder and CEO of the Job Applicant Perspective, first anonymous user reviews for job ads across the U.S., like Yelp in a world of professionally mandated fine dining, no health department, no FDA. Anyway, this level of go-to-market awareness as well as public service for the future of HR tech as I see it. I'm running a paradigm shift, so I do this on my Substack a couple times a week, and then once or twice a week, and then also in video and audio format, because trying to meet people where they are, because it matters. The goal at this point and the stage of the game, I play a long game, is narrative. You have to reground the narrative in reality. That's what I mean to do. Keep doing it. Keep holding the signal. You have to hold the signal and stand in a lighthouse in a storm. Keep holding the signal until people are ready. The job market does not sell matches anymore. The labor market has always had a coordination problem. Employers need workers, workers need employers. The market exists to resolve that gap efficiently, transparently, and at scale. For most of its history, it did. Not perfectly, not without friction, but with enough discipline that both sides of the transaction felt the cost of failure. That discipline is gone. And its absence is not an accident, a technical failure, or an unfortunate byproduct of scale. It is the product. Who this is for. Job seekers who feel they're doing everything right and still not moving forward and want a structural explanation, not a personal one. Employers who suspect their hiring pipelines are producing noise instead of signal and are not sure why. Journalists and policymakers trying to understand why a market that appears active at every level can still fail to produce consistent employment outcomes. And platform designers who want to understand the difference between systems that coordinate and systems that extract. And anyone who's looked at ghost jobs, evergreen roles, and a workforce tool that simply doesn't want to work and suspected that the explanation was designed to protect someone. The constraint nobody noticed disappearing. Before hiring moved online, the labor market operated under a constraint so obvious it was nearly invisible. Job seeker time was not free. In the newspaper era, a misleading job posting was not just an inconvenience, it was expensive for everyone in the chain. Space cost money. Reputation was local and long. If a classified ad wasted a job seeker's time, it damaged the paper's relationship with its readership. Circulation dropped, trust eroded, revenue followed. You could not scale misinformation without consequences. Now, nobody needs to tell me that the newspaper era wasn't some golden era of perfection where there was never an issue and nobody ever had any problems ever. Clearly not. That's not it. The goal isn't to say that wasn't it. It was to say what I just said. You could not scale misinformation in the same way with a local newspaper. You just can't. You can't. That constraint was the market's discipline mechanism. It forced intermediaries to care about both sides of the transaction, not out of the goodness of their hearts, but because failing one side cost you the other. Coordination wasn't just the goal, it was enforced by the fact that wasting the time of the workforce cost money. And then the market moved online. Distribution became free, listings became infinite, applications became effortless. It's a slot machine. And the cost of wasting job seeker time dropped to zero. Not gradually, not partially, zero. What happens to a market without a floor? In economics, constraints are not obstacles. They are information. They are boundaries. That's all. They tell vendors what the market will and won't tolerate. They force adaptation. They make failure expensive enough to correct. It's normal. Remove the constraint and you don't get a freer market. You get an undisciplined one. In a disciplined market, an open role is a cost. Every week, a position goes unfilled as productivity lost, revenue deferred, pressure building. That pressure forces resolution. Better offer, clearer posting, adjusted expectations. In an undisciplined market, an open role is content. The same engagement metrics that drive social platforms now drive hiring platforms. Ghost jobs are just clickbait. They're funny cat videos. But instead of being cute and funny, like babies laughing, they are psychologically destabilizing. It's akin to like those old school movies where like the high school football player invites you out on a date or to prom, and then you show up in your best dress and him and all his friends are laughing at you. It's like that, but in a survival market across the spectrum. And it's not that they're laughing at you, it's that they don't even know that they should care, that they jerked you around. They think it's just funny. You're desperate to survive, and they think it's a profit sign. It's not okay. It's not okay. It's not clickbait. It's worse than clickbait. Endless input, variable reward, no requirement for resolution. No one calls doom applying a mental health crisis. Not yet. It definitely is. I would be wildly surprised if in 100 years, the first 25 years of this job market weren't absolutely big part of the explanation of how the country started destabilizing. Like, this job market at scale is lemon market at scale, enforced by professional code. Like, why would you do that? It's not a good idea. It's a bad idea. I know why. It's a bad idea. We should not do that anymore. Applications slow and engagement metrics climb. Job seekers stay in the system, clicking, hoping, and returning. They can't leave. And none of that activity requires a hire to occur. This shift explains everything else. Ghost jobs are not a glitch. They are the natural output of a market where wasting the time of the job-seeking workforce in a survival market is a profit stream. A mental health and an economic crisis wrapped in a professional-looking package. Evergreen roles are not inefficiency. They are the inventory, kept alive because the traffic they produce is valuable no matter how much it harms the users that engage with. Don't get me wrong, adjunct pools properly labeled, I don't call them ghost roles. I don't call them Akerloft's lemons. Evergreen roles are absolutely Akerloft's lemons, openly, publicly admitted to, as if it's no big deal. They are an epistemic collapse. Identity frame lock is identity capture via epistemic collapse outside that you can't see it from the other's perspective. You got yourself a problem, and it's not the problem of the people out there. It's the problem right here. We got to be able to see from other perspectives as soon as we can. You don't have a belief has you. Somebody profited from you staying inside of this frame. You got to ask why. It's not a villainy, it's humanity to be frame locked. We have to figure it out. We have to break people out, you know? Scraped and duplicated roles persist because their accuracy is irrelevant. The traffic they generate is not. Talent shortages and skills gaps, they're not diagnoses. They are the vocabulary of institutional players betraying the job-seeking workforce in the very market they were hired to protect and oversee, a survival market. They were utterly vulnerable, and we just threw them under the bus. Honest to God, I think it's impressive how the vendors here have flipped the arbitration layer into the amplification of harm layer. It's supposed to be an arbitration of economic harm layer, and they flipped it into an economic amplification of their message. It's less explanation of coordination market dysfunction as much as delivery of identity market function. It is the identity. You're better than and they're worse than. The reason it doesn't work isn't because there's anything problematic in the middle. It's because of identity, skills gap, something they need to do. Nothing we need to do, nothing we need to change. No adaptation is ever required from employers, not really, to meet the needs. No adaptation is required from the market to meet the needs. The professional silence of job seekers never used to cover the market itself. Only when the market moved online was professionalism and silence extended to the entire market. Job seekers always had a voice in the market until it moved online. A market with unilateral governance categorically cannot sell matches. It is not possible. They protect identity when you have unilateral governance like this. It's not possible. A two-sided market that has unilateral governance is not coordinating a bridge. It's facilitating assimilation. It's protecting an inner source. It's profiting from exclusion, not from connection. Anyway, I say all this a million times. I'll say it again. I'll just keep going. There are less explanations of coordination market dysfunction as much as delivery of identity market promise, what they paid for, that you're better and you don't need to change because the problem is them. People that never had to ask whether the job seeker experience they were endorsing or funding was the one that it promised, because the people harmed by that question were structurally erased from the capacity to comment. Not meritocracy, but hierarchy, serfdom, epistemic collapse, ontological thinning. I don't know, I can use fancy words, but like, same thing. This is why 6 months unemployed with 15 years experience loses to just out of college, because you're not looking at capacity, capability, function, and adaptability. You're looking at connection and proximity to a desired identity. That's all it is, the comfort of connection to proximity to a desired identity. Not talent, not capacity, not capability or experience being judged, but proximity to a desired identity. And wage pressure softens not through conspiracy, but through the simple arithmetic. See what I just said there? Straight out of college versus people who can't get employed with 15 years experience and they're 6 months unemployed. It's just going to soften wage pressure. Arithmetic, it's not conspiracy, it's arithmetic. It's emergent from a complex system. When extended job searches keep employees afraid to ask for wages, wage pressure doesn't need conspiracy to soften. It just needs the search to continue, with the public policy and academics not caring or noticing or doing anything about it. And I know some people are, but I'm saying institutionally, as long as the search continues, but there's no public movement against this process, wages soften. It softens wages everywhere. Talent pools themselves function as Schrodinger's strikebreakers. The threat of the applicant pool disciplines wages without the pool ever needing to be real. Unions drop the ball so hard on this, it cannot be overstated. You could still jump the game. The best time to change is now, you know? Not like I'm a perfect person. So why do employers need to pay the workforce better when they can just work generating revenue for the talent industry for free? You want to get a raise or you want to be unemployed? Seems like your current salary is good enough, isn't it? That's what I thought. You know? Or you want to work extra hours, or you just want to work for free for those guys, you know? When an applicant is far more profitable to every talent vendor out there on application 400 than application 4, why would they make the hiring process more efficient? Look at the profit streams. Econ 101. Cui bono? Who benefits? Who profits? Hiring noise. It's always clear who profits from that. The vendors. The flip and what it costs. This is where the coordination market became an identity market. Not because anyone chose it, but because the floor disappeared and the incentives filled the space. When job seeker time had a price, vendors were accountable to both sides. The non-paying user, the job seeker, was load-bearing. Their experience mattered because their trust was the mechanism through which employer value is delivered. When job seeker time became free, that accountability evaporated. The non-paying user became an input, an audience, a crowd at the door whose presence made the venue feel important without requiring the venue to serve them. And the market reorganized accordingly. It's a nightclub model. It's not, the goal isn't to get people inside, it's to always have a crowd at the door. Identity signals, credentials, titles, pedigree, prestige, place coordination signals, because identity signals are easy to filter, easy to sell, and require no accountability to outcomes. Job seekers learn to perform visibility rather than demonstrate fit. Employers learn to purchase the feeling of selectivity rather than the reality of a match. And platforms learn to monetize the arena rather than the outcome. Access to employment was not denied. It was delayed stochastically. Just enough for people to get hired. Just enough people get hired to maintain belief in the system. Just enough don't to sustain the supply of participants. This is not a broken market. This is a market working precisely as its incentive structure demands. Information asymmetry as a profit stream. Full stop. Because the people who we usually would inform in a marketplace or would require to inform are outside of the appropriate identity. So any harm that comes to them doesn't matter. You know? Identity, frame lock, epistemic collapse is tanking the economy and civic society. It's not okay. what the intermediaries were paid to notice. Here's the part that matters for what comes next. In a two-sided market, the intermediary's obligation is not to one side. Anytime you have a platform, it is to the functions. Newspapers understood this not morally but structurally. Their revenue depended on delivering value to both sides of the transaction. When they failed job seekers, they failed employers too. The constraint was self-correcting. Online hiring intermediaries inherited the role without inheriting the accountability. Like I said, the first time the market required the silence of the workforce was when it moved online, and it started collapsing after that. Nash's non-converging equilibrium, Employers filter, so job seekers optimize for visibility. So employers double down on filtering, so job seekers double down on visibility. So employers triple down on filtering, so job seekers triple down on visibility. Bing, bang, boom, The accountability got dropped. The market wasn't required to behave anymore, so it didn't, People didn't require any accountability, and so it didn't develop it. But they were paid to coordinate. Their marketing said and still says coordination. Their contracts imply coordination. They're like people claiming to be a restaurant while openly acknowledging that they don't serve food all the time. But job seekers have to be there anyway. Yeah, that's a mistake. Public archives, you don't need whistleblowers here. It's right there. But once job seeker time was free, coordination was no longer required to sustain revenue. And the data, their own fiscal year reports, their own engagement metrics, their own revenue models show exactly what they optimized for. They didn't hide it. The emperor had no clothes. He just had everybody else in a free lock where they weren't allowed to look at the fact that he had no clothes. This is not about hires. This is about participation. Plausibly delaying access to employment via information asymmetry at every turn. White labeling, lack of FAQ, lack of training, and tech support for half the stakeholders and well over 95% of the users in the US, at least. Lack of feedback, information asymmetry as a profit stream in a survival market. Is breathtakingly predictable that civic stability would crash during a period like this. Not outcomes. 160 million people and all their dependents operating under a survival market like this. Throughput, not coordination, retention of the search. That is delaying access to survival when retention of the search is the thing. A market that profits from delaying outcomes is not accidentally failing to produce them. It is structured to avoid producing them because production would end the revenue stream that delay sustains. The intermediaries did not need to understand this. They only needed not to question it. And in a market where not asking was profitable, they didn't. This is not malice. It is structural negligence, measurable, documentable, and profitable. It's literally in their public archives, their public records. It's in their marketing, their PR, their pitch book, their investor decks. It's right there. Check the research. The dynamics described here appear across multiple fields, but they converge on the same structural conclusion. Eleanor Ostrom, Governing the Commons, its governance design lineage for TJOP. Rocher and Trull, Platform Competition in Two-Sided Markets, Incentive Structure of Platforms that Serve Two Sides. George Akerlof talks about how information asymmetry collapses metric quality when bad actors face no cost. Hint, hint, hint. Mark Granovetter, The Strength of Weak Ties, What Functional Coordination Looks Like in Real Labor Markets. There's a guy named Swarovski, I can't say his name wrong. The Wisdom of Crowds, Why the Many Are Smarter Than the Few, and How Collective Wisdom Shapes Business, Economics, Societies, and Nations. Why Crowdsourced Accountability Keeps Markets Clean, and Why Crowdsourced Accountability, and What Happens Without It. I also have my own white papers and design models on OSF, SSRN, and Zenodo. The job applicant perspective is when job seekers stop asking permission to protect themselves. The job applicant perspective was built on a foundational truth. Markets require discipline to function properly. So job seeker time is not free. Not philosophically, structurally. Yeah. TJOP does not profit from extended search because it is not selling the best matches. It is selling a trustworthy environment, a space where reputation has weight and behavior has consequences. Discipline. Because in systems theory, with a complex dynamic system that impacts so many in this type of cycle of degradation, this is the leverage point. The situation in the online job market is breathtakingly grim. It's not good, but it's also breathtakingly hopeful all at the same time. Because this may be planned obsolescence in a survival market affecting billions' ability to eat. Information asymmetry running unchecked for decades for profit. But two things are also true. This is a two-sided market. It is. They forgot. In unilateral governance, they genuinely forget that the market has two sides. Side number two outnumbers side number one by billions. Survival is really quite a motivating driver. I know that we're all in a frame lock, but I got broke out of the frame lock. I'm breaking others out, and survival is a real great driver to keep breaking people out of this frame lock, you know? It just is. Also, realistically, user reviews are standard fare. They're well-known behavioral practice in all other marketplaces. Google Maps for hiring markets, Wikipedia, the tech is standard, not revolutionary. The upside is billions in profit and trillions in saved opportunity costs. It solves problems for every good actor, employers, job seekers, public policy, academics, and the employed. Everyone wins. It's a win-win-win-win-win, you know? It stabilizes the salaries for the employed people and civic safety at the same time. And it gives job seekers, for the first time in decades, relief and hope for a better future. They've lost that for decades now. And it makes a lot of money doing it. Someone investing in me makes a lot of money. It's actually kind of like, it's so much money. I have great investor decks. People help, you know? When job seeker time is weight, and when the platform has to earn participation rather than capture it, the incentives realign. Coordination stops being optional. Outcomes stop being incidental. The market starts behaving like a market again instead of an economic oil rig. Job seeker user experience is not a feature of the job applicant perspective. It's load-bearing infrastructure. Because in a coordination market, it always was. That's what it is. Disney sells to kids in order to please the parents. Right now, they're just selling to the parents, and they're making more the longer that the rides don't work for the kids. And that's logically disconnected from reality. It's not good. Our way is better. Sure of it. Pretty positive. I love me some good math. Ground yourself in that stuff. It's good for me. It's not a bug. It's the business model. The math is already there. The labor market did not lose its discipline because technology got too powerful. It lost its discipline because one price went to zero and no one whose revenue depended on that price being zero had any reason to notice. Markets without floors do not collapse dramatically. They hollow out quietly, producing the appearance of activity while systematically failing to deliver the function they were paid to perform. Ghost jobs, evergreen roles, stochastic delays, wages that don't move, these are not symptoms of a broken system. They are outputs of an undisciplined one. And a market that is structured to avoid coordination while being paid to provide it, yeah, that has a name for that gap. The articles ahead that will trace that chain, the known economic failure mode sold as innovation. 150-year-old failure mode sold as innovation. Crazy me. The due diligence that wasn't done by those who invested in it, the money, and the stakeholders who absorbed the cost while the platforms absorbed the margins. Yeah. Job seekers don't need to convince anyone of anything right now. Not a thing. No personal experience is required. People running a category error say the foolishest things out loud. Really shouldn't say. But they don't notice because they're like emperors who have no clothes, but they frame locked everyone into not noticing, you know? Once you're outside of the frame, you're like, oh, yeah. Yeah. Argerson show, second order stuff. I don't know. Think you guys needed a systems thinker to jump into economics for a little bit, help you all out. I'll slip back out eventually here because, you know, not actually a trained economist, but systems thinking. It's pretty great. Yeah. First principles. I love me some first principles. It's beautiful first principles. I love it. Linguistic economics, I think, starting from observations of the behavior and building up into the pattern instead of starting from the way the pattern should be and building down, you know? I like first principles, you know? The articles will chase that chain. The known economic failure mode sold as innovation, the due diligence that wasn't done by those invested in, the money, the stakeholders absorb the cost while the platforms absorb the margins. Job seekers don't need to convince anyone of anything. Local municipalities and small businesses across the country will join them soon enough. The fiscal reports are public. They really are. They said these things out loud. One click apply. Yikes, that's embarrassing. The fiscal reports are public. The marketing is archived. The revenue models speak for themselves. 1 + 1 is 2. Follow the money. Multi-billion-dollar settlements have been built on less. These will be built on math. That's all I got. Kind of a long one still, but please like, follow, share, post if you can. And check out the Job Applicant Perspective in the Substack. These new versions will come out soon enough, and I will be starting with my companies. It's really easy once you set the framework. You can just take one company at a time, use their public records, and start looking at, fiscal year reports and just how much money do they probably owe the public in the workforce, It's pretty straightforward, actually. Well, I'll go through one by one. You'll see for yourself. Falsifiable data. That's the thing. You really shouldn't trust random people saying things. You should really make sure that I could say things that you can test yourself and make sure that it holds up, It's better. So, all right. Thanks very much. Have a good one.